Welcome back to Table for One, my YouTube cooking show for anybody who is cooking for one or who just wants deliciously easy meals. We are really leaning into autumn cozy vibes with this video. So I'm going to be sharing 3 of my all-time favorite one pot, one portion recipes. 2 of them I'm going to tell you about and the other one I'm going to show you how to cook. The start of the show today is the humble aubergine, or eggplant if you are in North America. So today's recipe is going to be a stuffed aubergine roll, kind of like an aubergine parmigiana. So we are thinly slicing the aubergine and we are going to fill it with a deliciously flavoured ricotta. We're going to roll that up and then we're going to bake it in a tomato sauce with lots of mozzarella. It is so cozy, it is so comforting. It's still kind of fresh because we're using tomatoes and basil and lemon and a little bit of chili. But with the amount of cheese that we're using, it's also an incredible comfort food. Perfect scooped up with a little bit of bread. Let's get started. What we're gonna do first is we're just gonna slice our aubergine into really thin slices. Because we're gonna be rolling it up, you don't want it too thick because it would just snap and crack. Snap, crackle, pop. I feel fairly confident with my knife skills, you would hope, after spending a lot of money to go to culinary school. You could use a mandolin if you have one of those. I actually don't own a mandolin. If you do, please be very careful because those things are scary. But I feel confident with my knife skills. What I've done is I've chopped the top off, which means I have a flat base, and then I'm gonna cut down lengthways. You're kind of looking for it to just be a couple of millimeters thick. That was actually a pretty perfect slice. I wasn't sure how that was gonna go, but that went quite well. It's thin enough that it can flop around and be rolled up. Now that you have a flat surface on this side, you could do it that way so that you're sort of cutting less, if that makes sense. You don't have to go all the way from up here. You could also use courgette for this recipe, but aubergine is obviously slightly bigger, which means that you have slightly more space to fill with the ricotta filling, which, if you ask me, is exactly what we want. Oh, that one didn't work, but that's okay. It's okay, they don't have to be perfect, don't you worry about it. It's all gonna get baked and kind of soften down and merge into one anyway. Oh, that was a nice one. Maybe like 3 millimeters, maybe 2, I don't know. But thin enough that you can roll it up without it cracking. And obviously that's gonna be filled with delicious ricotta filling, which is what we're gonna make now. So just pop your aubergine to the side. You don't have to do anything with this. You can salt it if you want. And actually, maybe I will salt it. Yeah, maybe I will. You actually don't have to salt aubergine that much anymore. So it used to be partially to make it slightly less bitter. But aubergines, I'm pretty certain I'm saying this correctly and I've not just made this up, but they've just been bred to not be as bitter. Bred, is that the right word? They've been reared to not be as bitter anymore. That being said, even though we don't need to do this for bitterness, salting the aubergine will actually help just draw out some of the moisture. It's not a huge problem in this dish if there is the moisture, but if you can draw out some of it, it just means that the sauce, when it bakes, is gonna stay really rich, not get too watered down or anything. So whilst that's just sitting there anyway, salting it isn't the worst idea. Anyway, I'm blabbing. Right, we need a bowl. Okay, onto our ricotta filling. Handy bowl for rubbish here, which is a useful thing to have on hand, whether you're cooking for many, for one, in your own kitchen, whatever. It's just useful to have a rubbish bowl, so then you can just throw that in the bin at the end. Anyway, the ricotta filling. So ricotta is an Italian kind of semi-soft cheese. So it's creamy, but it has a slight tang as well. It's not too rich, and it's not as creamy as something like a mascarpone, which is a really deliciously creamy cream cheese. It feels kind of light in many ways, which is really good for a dish like this that we don't want to be too heavy. So you're just gonna spoon some ricotta into a bowl, and then we're gonna flavor this with lots of delicious things. This is a fairly neutral base, which means that anything that we add to the ricotta is really gonna level up its flavor. And today I'm going with some fairly classic flavors that you would see in a dish like this. It's also kind of similar to what you would find in a lasagna. So in the bechamel sauce of a lasagna, you often get some of these flavors if they're kind of trying to level it up a bit. Starting with some fresh lemon zest, which is obviously just gonna add zing and brightness to this dish. We're also going to add lots of fresh basil. You could use another herb if you wanted, but kind of sticking with the Italian vibes and going with basil today. I'm also going to add just the tiniest bit of fresh chili because I quite like a little bit of spice in this, and again, it just works really well with the melty cheese and the slight richness of the tomato sauce. And then finally, I'm going to go in with some nutmeg. Nutmeg is such an underused spice. This is ground nutmeg. I would actually recommend getting whole nutmeg. What would you call that? Well, just whole nutmegs. They look like nuts. Whole nuts. The reason I would recommend whole ones is it means that the flavour is fresher and slightly stronger. And what you do with whole nutmeg is just finely grate it into whatever dish you're making. You want to be slightly sparing when you're using nutmeg because if anything is too nutmeggy, you can really tell, and it can be quite overpowering. But when you use it in the right quantities, it just adds the most gorgeous, obviously kind of nutty, earthy, gently spiced flavour, which works so well with this combination of ingredients. Oh look, you can even start to see, it's only been a couple of minutes, you can start to see the water being drawn out of the salt. You see how it's getting kind of damp on top? That's all the water being drawn out via osmosis. Fun. Zest going in. I'm going to use the zest of about half a lemon because you do want it to be quite bright, and as I always talk about, when you're making kind of any dish, you want to be thinking about flavour profiles and different ways of balancing the flavours in your dish. So in this one, you have the creaminess of the ricotta, which is then balanced with the acidity of the lemon zest, the spice from the chili, the freshness from the herbs. You're kind of touching on different elements of, you know, salt, sour, sweet, umami, bitter, but also the salt, fat, acid, heat element of cooking. And if you're looking to become a slightly more intuitive cook, then those are the things that you want to be thinking about when you're creating your own dishes. So then I've just added in a pinch of nutmeg. Then I'm just going to grab another chopping board and I'm going to finely slice the basil and finely chop the chili. I'm probably only going to use half a chili because I don't want this to be super duper spicy. I just want a kind of subtle chili flavour. So I'm also going to take the seeds out and then just thinly slice it into like matchsticks, and then you can go the other way and then you get a fine chop. That's going in. I really want quite a lot of basil in this. I want it to be quite a herby filling, just because that freshness works so well. Obviously with the flavours of tomato and mozzarella. Okay, that's going in. A very good pinch of salt. Sea salt, preferably, as always. But don't forget, when you're seasoning this filling, you also have to think about the fact that you're seasoning the aubergine as well. So you can slightly over-season because this kind of has to go a long way in terms of providing flavour for the whole dish. That's looking delicious. Give it a try. I think that's good because I can taste, I get the heat from the chili first, then I get the acidity from the lemon, and then just at the end you get that nutmeg flavour, which is so nice and just kind of rounds everything off, brings that earthy flavour, which sounds like it would be unappealing, but it's a good thing. Next up, we are going to roll our aubergine, but first we will pat it dry slightly. Literally all we're gonna do is pat off the water that's been drawn out from salting the aubergine into the bin. What we're gonna do is just prep our pan so that when we roll the aubergine, it can go straight in the pan so it doesn't unroll. So, this is a 22 centimetre oven-proof cast iron shallow casserole dish. You could use a skillet, you could use any oven-proof dish, anywhere from kind of 6 to 8 inches in diameter, so like 17 to 22 centimetres. I wouldn't go any bigger than this, but this is quite a good size because you can fit the rolls in without them being too cramped, because if everything's too close together, the steam will get trapped and it might just get a bit soggy. If everything's too far apart, then things could burn or dry out. So you just want to be conscious of that when you're making it. And as with all of my recipes, obviously they're all single serve, but if you want to scale them up to serve 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 or 20, they are so easy to do. You literally just times it by the number of people that you're serving. But think about the dish that you're using when you're doing that. So this is a good size for one person. You could probably fit 2 people's portions in this, but any bigger than that and you're gonna wanna use a bigger dish. So I'm gonna go in with the base of our sauce, which is tinned tomatoes, specifically good quality tinned tomatoes. I love this brand. This is the Mutti finely chopped ones, which are really, really good quality Italian tomatoes. If you can't find these, I would suggest buying cherry tomatoes in a can rather than chopped tomatoes, because often the chopped tomatoes they use slightly worse quality tomatoes for that, because you're going to chop them up and nobody will know. Whereas the cherry tomatoes have to be quite good quality because they're kept whole in the can, and then you can kind of crush them down with a fork. I'm going to go in with 200 grams, which is about half a can. That looks about right. For a good quality tomato sauce, I think you only need 2 additional ingredients, and that is salt and butter. The salt obviously seasons everything, and the butter adds a richness that brings depth to the sauce. It also slightly brings out the sweetness of the tomatoes. It's honestly so delicious. So, good quality butter is always going to be better. Good quality ingredients in general are always just going to bring so much more flavour to your dish. I would say buy the best that you can afford. Where possible, buy British if you live in the UK. If you don't, don't. And when it comes to butter, Irish butter, like Kerrygold, is really top quality. I'm just going to stir that around. Obviously this isn't hot yet, but the butter will just kind of melt in as everything cooks, so don't worry too much about that not melting. Just stir the salt through. I'm not actually going to add pepper to this because, controversially, I actually don't know that I would consider pepper a seasoner. Everyone always says like season with salt and pepper, and I've definitely done that in the past. Salt is a seasoner, whereas pepper is a spice, and there are some dishes that I don't think they need pepper. Obviously we have pepper in the filling, so I actually don't think this needs any additional black pepper, heat or spice. If you love pepper and you want to add more, then absolutely crack on. Then what we're going to do is take probably about, this is a heaped teaspoon, but that's probably more like 2 teaspoons of filling. Then you want to place it on one end of your aubergine. Literally just roll it up. You don't just squish it down. It doesn't need to be really tight. Just roll it up like that until it's folded in on itself. And then nestle it in the pan with the overlapping side on the bottom so it doesn't open up in the pan. And then repeat with the rest of the slices and you're good to go. That was honestly so easy. I feel like when you see a recipe like this, you think that that must take so much time, but it really actually doesn't, especially when you're only making it for one, because we've used about half an aubergine here. The final thing we're going to do to this is top it with fresh mozzarella and then bake it in the oven. Fresh mozzarella is in my top 5 cheeses of all time. In fact, it might be my number 1. I'm not going to tell you how much mozzarella to put on top of this because that is a personal preference. I am not here to judge anybody for the amount of mozzarella that you put on, unless you don't put on enough, in which case I absolutely will be judging you. The last thing, drizzle over a little bit of olive oil. Yummy. And then this is going to go in the oven at 220 degrees Celsius or 200 degrees fan. We're going to bake it until the mozzarella is golden and melty. The aubergine will be soft. And then the last thing we'll do is just top it with a little bit more fresh basil, and you have the most delicious, fresh and cozy dinner. While our Aubergine Parmigiana is baking, let me tell you about 2 of my other favourite cozy one-pot meals. First up is another aubergine recipe, but this time it's for an Aubergine Carbonara. So this recipe is made solely on the hob. You don't have to turn the oven on, and it obviously draws inspiration from a traditional carbonara, but this is a vegetarian version. Rather than using guanciale, which is a cured pork cheek, and that's the traditional meat used in a carbonara, I use aubergine, but in order to get that kind of rich, umami, slightly fatty flavour, you really have to add a bit to the aubergine because aubergine itself is not rich or fatty. So we have to add a couple things, and those things are lots of olive oil, number 1, which is what we cook the aubergine down in first. Then we also add a little bit of smoked paprika for that kind of cured smoky, meaty, rich flavour, which obviously isn't exactly the same as guanciale, but it brings a similar vibe. And then the last thing we add is miso. So miso is a fermented soybean paste, and what it adds is umami flavour to any dish. Adding miso to aubergine, which isn't naturally salty or umami, kind of gives it a flavour that's slightly more reminiscent of a cured meat. Other than that, it is the most simple dish ever. We simply cook down the aubergine, take it out and let it steam just on the chopping board to soften even more. Add in spaghetti, let that cook until al dente before stirring through a mixture of egg, egg yolk and Parmesan cheese. Then you add the aubergine back in and the whole dish comes together in about less than 20 minutes, if not less than 15 minutes. It's seriously comforting, seriously delicious, perfect for a solo date night. And you can actually find the full recipe on my Substack. I pair it with a really nice non-alcoholic spritz to make that kind of solo date night vibe. But you can find that recipe over on my Substack for paid subscribers, along with lots of other ones and meal plans for anybody who is cooking for one. The second recipe that I absolutely love is my creamy prawn and tomato orzo. Now obviously as we're heading into kind of autumn, winter, tomatoes aren't going to be as fresh as they are in summer because the season is ending. You can use fresh tomatoes if you can still find them, or if not you can use tinned tomatoes for this. What this is orzo cooked in a tomato sauce until just al dente, and then you stir through double cream, lemon juice, and then we're adding frozen prawns, which are a really great and slightly cheaper alternative to fresh prawns, but the end result is almost exactly the same in a dish like this. Again, this is a dish that is made entirely on the hob, so you don't need to turn the oven on. It feels kind of fresh because you're using tomatoes and there's some lemon in there, a couple of fresh herbs, but because it's kind of that creamy, silky one pot pasta, it's also deliciously comforting, which is exactly what I want at this time of year. That recipe you can find on my Instagram and on my website, along with so many other one pot, one portion dishes. And as always, these could be made for one person, but you could also scale them up to feed as many people as you like. Now, back to my Aubergine Parmigiana. Wow. No, sorry, that's stunning. This looks amazing. So what you can see here is the tomato sauce has kind of bubbled and reduced down a little bit, so it's nice and rich. The aubergine is soft and tender, but just around the edges, kind of where the skin is, it's just starting to crisp up slightly to provide a kind of texture contrast. The ricotta filling has oozed out ever so slightly, which is exactly what we want. And then obviously the mozzarella on top looks completely divine. I'm very excited about this one. Literally all we need to do is top it with some fresh basil. You want to let it cool down slightly before eating because you will die if you put this in your mouth at this temperature. And that is my ricotta stuffed aubergine parmigiana done. I can't tell you how excited I am to eat this. It looks completely delicious. As I say, you could easily serve this with bread. You could serve it with rice. That would be nice as well. But I do think that there's enough going on in this dish for it to just be served by itself as well, if that is what you fancy. So let's dig in. Oh, yeah. Doesn't that look absolutely incredible? Oh, that is bloody good. And what's nice is that the sauce isn't super runny. It's thickened up a bit. Okay, I need to be left alone with my aubergine parmigiana now. So I will see you in next week's video. Tomato sauce. Kind of flesh. It's not flesh. I think that bread. Babbly wobbly. That would be obscene.